What's up, guys? It's Dr. Tim Jackson with another episode of the Boss Body Podcast. We talk about the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, and how balancing the sympathetic, parasympathetic systems are incredibly important for overall health. So I brought in an expert in this matter, Dr. Torkil Færø, who's both an emergency medicine physician and a family medicine physician. He is the author of The Pulse Cure.
While I make every effort to broadcast correct information, I'm also still learning. I will double check all my facts, but realize that healthcare is a constantly changing science and art. One doctor or healthcare provider may have a different way of doing things from another. I welcome any comments, suggestions, or correction of errors. I take no money from supplement or device companies. By listening to this podcast or reading this blog, you agree not to use this podcast or blog as medical advice or to treat any medical condition in either yourself or others, including but not limited to patients that you are treating. Consult your healthcare provider for any medical issues that you may be having. This entire disclaimer also applies to any guests or contributors to the podcast or the website. Under no circumstances shall any guests or contributors to the podcast or blog or any employees, associates, or affiliates of the Boss Body podcast be responsible for damages arising from use of the podcast or the blog. This blog or podcast should not be used in any legal capacity whatsoever, including but not limited to establishing the standard of care in a legal sense or as a basis for expert witness testimony. No guarantee is given regarding the accuracy of any statements or opinions made on the podcast or the blog.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Færø.
Thank you, Dr. Tim. It's great to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about your journey from, medical school, residency, and then how you got interested in things outside of acute care.
Yeah, so I studied medicine to be able to live a free life, to be able to work as a freelance doctor, because you can do that in Norway. You can take work for like 2 weeks or 4 months or whatever, and then you can go off and do a lot of interesting things around the world. So that was my main interest in medicine. Of course, it's interesting to know about the body and so on, and very interesting to meet so many different people. It's like being on the front row of life. So I loved all of these things, and but wasn't very interested in health in itself, whether the kidneys were working or heart was working. That was kind of my ticket to sit on the front row of life. So, and I didn't care much about my own health really as well. So I did everything wrong. All the lifestyle strategies that I describe in the Pulse Cure, that we now know is very smart to do, I did them all wrong, and weighed 40 pounds overweight, did not care about what I was eating, did not exercise and so on, because we didn't really think that there was so much lifetime to gain from doing those good strategies. We thought it may be 2 or 3 years, but it would take you 2 or 3 years to do that. So why even bother? But then my father died at 73. That is 10, 11 years ago. And I understood that, okay, medicine has moved so much forward. We know now so much more about how to keep us healthy. Because in medical school, we only learned how to diagnose and categorize and find the treatment. And we did not learn how to create health, which is a different thing than just curing illness and waiting until illness occurs and then trying to cure it. So I understood that, okay, I missed out on a lot. So I started reading, I started educating myself in my spare time, of course, and understood that if I want to live those extra 20 years that I would want to have, I have to fix it myself. And I just started changing my life all around for my own sake. And somewhere on the way there, I got aware of that we can use the wearables. That's probably 5 years ago, that we can use wearables and heart rate variability to track these differences. So whatever is good for your lifestyle will be visible in the heart rate. Or if it's bad for your lifestyle, it will also be visible. So it's like you suddenly have a dashboard for your physiology, just like you have in your car. You see your physiological speed or intensity, you see the amount of energy or an estimate of your energy that you have available every day, how to charge better, and how to be able to spend your energy more wisely and not waste it on stupid things like ultra processed food or nicotine or alcohol and all of the different ways that can sap us of our forces. Yeah, and somewhere also along the way, my publisher got aware of that I was doing this and asked if I could write a book on the subject, and I did, and that has been a huge bestseller in Norway, and it's now translated into 8 languages, and of course, including English, and has just turned my life upside down. Where I used to be just a normal GP talking one-on-one with patients, and I've had 100,000 consultations over the years. And with 50,000 different people. So that is what I was used to, and then suddenly I find myself on radios and TV and podcasts and magazines, and suddenly my life is totally different. But I really love to share this knowledge because I know that people need to hear about it, and to avoid getting sick, to avoid getting into this office. I'm now at the ER, and to avoid seeing these patients.
Yeah, I mean, what I tell people is I'm extremely thankful for emergency medicine personnel and doctors, trauma surgeons, but outside of that, at least in the US, we don't do a very good job of treating chronic illness or preventing illness. It's a pill for an ill. Americans, we represent 5% of the world's population, but we consume 50% of the world's pharmaceuticals. And that's
Wow.
not good. So we spend more than any other country on healthcare, but we're not doing a very good job because here, big pharma, FDA, and the insurance companies are essentially one and the same organization. But I'm interested, in terms of when you see patients, obviously in the ER, things are a bit different. But in terms of family medicine, do you talk to patients about heart rate variability?
Uh, I would sometimes, but they come and they expect to get a pill or
Right.
to get a referral to some specialist.
Mhm.
And usually, if I mention that their lifestyle could have something to do with the problem that they have, they will just be annoyed. And you do it sometimes if you have some hunch that this patient may be open for discussing some lifestyle strategies, but most of the time they want the easy solution. And that is what they have been taught, and most people will expect that. So, and you don't want to like quarrel with 5 patients every day. So, it's stressful enough as it is. So usually even me, just tend to give up and do as they want.
Yeah. How is it there in terms of the pharmaceutical companies? Do they have a stronghold on medicine?
Yeah, probably not as, proactive as in the US, with commercials and that kind of thing. I don't think that is legal in Norway, only for over-the-counter drugs, but not for
Yeah.
prescription drugs. So I think it's worse in the US. But of
Yeah.
course, the whole healthcare system is based upon waiting until a patient gets sick and then treating them. And because there's too much money in sick patients,
Right.
so one of the good things about the wearables is that there's now money on the front side of disease, and so that you as a patient, or rather as a person without getting to be a patient, that it's a shift of power over your health from the healthcare and the doctors and over into literally your own hands. So
Right.
so it's a big major shift.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when you started getting into, do you guys use the term functional medicine there?
Yeah, functioning medicine, I would say, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So when you started getting into this, um, did you start speaking with your colleagues about it, sharing your knowledge with them?
No, I was mainly interested in this only for my own sake. So I started this as on my own health journey, and I didn't really. And there was the Pulse Cure is the world's first guidebook on how to use a wearable. So I had no one to consult with. I have the, and this is I started before the wearables, I started with an ECG monitor that I had on my chest and no help. It's like on the Garmin watch, you'll get, they will tell you, a resume of the day, or give you advice on what to do. But I could only get the readouts. Am I in the stress mode, or am I in the parasympathetic mode, and how do I shift this balance here? So I had to do the work myself, and I think most of the other doctors just thought I was a weirdo walking around with this weird thing on my chest. So I didn't really discuss it. I was just on my way to explore it myself, I think.
Yeah. And so talk to us about heart rate variability. So I'm not an expert like you in heart rate variability, but I think it's confusing for the average person to understand that, there's a great deal of, or should be a great deal of
Mm.
variation in terms of our heart rate, from minute to minute. And so talk to us about what that looks like. And a lot of times I get the question is, what is an optimal heart rate variability? But my understanding is you want to look at your baseline and make sure it's trending upward. There's not necessarily an absolute value. Is that correct?
Hmm. Yeah, that's right. So there's kind of a 50% genetic component to the value, so you shouldn't compare yourself to others in that way, and you should try to get as good heart rate variability as you can. But it's also flexible. You're not supposed to have very rigid days. It's supposed to bounce a bit up and down, but within sustainable balance. So
Right.
you're supposed to have rough days and easy days, and have a kind of a pulsating lifestyle. But luckily, heart rate variability is a quite easy, understandable concept. And that is because if you are in the relaxed state and your body is calm, your mind is calm, then when you breathe in and you fill your lungs with oxygen, the heart rate goes up a little bit to take advantage of that extra oxygen and pushes on a bit faster. And when you breathe out and there's less oxygen in the lungs, the heart rate just slows down just a little bit, measured in milliseconds. But it's palpable on your carotid, for example, if you are relaxed. You can feel this difference. And this is, of course, also what the ancient doctors could feel with the pulse. But if you are in the stress state from whatever reason, whether it's physical or physiological or mental stress, then your heart rate will respond and it will beat faster regardless, and it will beat very steady regardless of your breathing in and out. And then, of course, the wearables can detect this difference between a variable rhythm or a kind of a very, very steady rhythm in the moment, and then accumulated throughout the day, 24/7, the week and months and years. So it can help you while you're busy living your life and communicating and doing your thing. It will keep track of the physiological speed, so to speak, in the moment. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point because a lot of times there are things that stress our systems that we don't necessarily perceive as being stressful. And I hear people all the time, oh, I'm going to go just work out extremely hard in the gym. Well, if you already have a high allostatic load, where you have gut dysbiosis, a lot of environmental toxins, heavy metals, mycotoxins, and then you go and you're not sleeping well and you go to the gym and you just push yourself to the max, you're going to be in a sympathetic fight or flight and you're not going to be able to recover.
Yeah, and you're just gonna create more inflammation in your system. So,
Right.
that's absolutely a quite common problem for the ones who try to do everything right. And
Yeah.
it's just as you say, we can't really feel the stress in ourselves. It's a kind of sense that we have never needed to develop as human beings, because throughout history it has been, the lifestyle has been that you fight when you have to, or hunt when you have to, and when you don't do that, you relax and you hang around the campfire, and then
Right.
you're in the parasympathetic mode. So, and because, for example, whether I have 60 in heart rate or 85 in heart rate, I have no clue. It's not something that I would feel, and
Right.
particularly not while I'm busy doing something. And even if I'm standing completely still trying to feel it, I can't. And that would represent a huge difference in inflammation and stress level. So that just shows that this sense has been muted to be able to listen and look and smell and taste and not disturb those senses. So we're not equipped for this lifestyle that we have now.
Right. Absolutely. Let's talk about some of the wearables that you mentioned. So here in the US, we have the Aura Ring and a few others. What are your go-to wearables that you recommend?
That is by far the Garmin watch.
The
And
Garmin
that is
watch?
because Garmin, yeah.
Okay.
So that's a US company based in Kansas. And they have, and the genius is that they have bought a Finnish company called Firstbeat with more than 20 years of experience with the physiological measurement, and just incorporated their system and also improved it, I think. But the basis of it they have bought so that it's the way they show their algorithms to you that is so much better than the other ones.
Okay. So can you give us an example? Because I know of the Garmin watch, but I haven't used one. So it gives you heart rate variability. What are some of the other metrics?
It will give you heart rate variability. It will give you sleep quality. It will give you VO2 max, which is also very important to know. It will give you a result after a workout of how much recovery time you need. And you would also see then the heart rate variability over time to see, for example, a woman that is menstruating with PMS symptoms would see that the week before menstruation that the dip is really low. So they will be able to see the physiological load on their system, and they would be able to mitigate that stress and to flatten that curve and get relieved of the PMS symptoms, for example. This is some of the things you can see.
Okay. Awesome. And in terms of heart rate variability, what are some things? So if someone has a really low heart rate variability, where do you tell them to begin? Because I haven't had the opportunity to read your book yet. So I'm wondering, what are your recommendations
Yeah.
to begin?
Yeah, so they could have how do you say a natural low heart rate variability and still be in good health. So for example, a lot of people would think that 35 would be a low heart rate variability, but it could be that it's just their kind of native baseline. But if they are stressed and their heart rate variability is low because of stress, then it could be a long way ahead. And particularly if you have been stressed over time, that you have fatigue symptoms or burnout and many of these symptoms, then it can be a really long way to get out of this dysfunctional autonomic nervous system. But generally, it's about getting better sleep. It's about cutting down on alcohol, which is one of the most problematic things. It's about not eating a late meal to disturb sleep and sleep quality. Um, and it's about getting your fitness level better and eating better, avoiding ultra processed food, eating real food and whole foods. All of these things that you also, of course, I've listened to the podcast, knows about. And it's basically, as I just listened to your episode on evolution, and it's basically taking us back towards the physiology that we had during evolution. So getting outside more, moving more and in a natural amount, getting sunshine, getting grounding, um, and so on. Getting sleep at night, having a circadian rhythm that we are made for, now, 25% or so work nighttime and so on. And that is also very problematic. Yeah.
What effect does caffeine have on heart rate variability?
It doesn't necessarily have so much effect on the heart rate variability. I think then you have to drink a lot of coffee. I don't see any difference, but it will have an effect on your sleep quality. So generally, to be sure that it won't affect your sleep quality, you should not drink after midday,
Right.
because the half time of caffeine is like 6 hours, for most people. And even if you think that you can drink coffee later, it will probably disturb your sleep, and so that you will get less deep sleep,
Right.
um, and spend more time falling asleep. So, but in the morning, it's good as a kind of kickstarter of the day, just like
Mhm.
sunlight in your eyes.
Yeah,
It's said that like 3 to 4 cups of coffee, between you get up, or preferably a little bit after you get up until noon, that is just healthy for your heart rate variability and health level.
interesting. And in terms of circadian rhythm, so have you noticed a significant difference between people who are going to bed, say, at midnight or 1 a.m., once they start titrating their sleep time, the sleep initiation down to say 10 or 10:30 p.m., an improvement in their heart rate variability?
I'm not sure in heart rate variability, but they often tell me that they have improvement in the deep sleep. If they go to
Okay.
bed earlier, their deep sleep will be better and they will feel better. And maybe probably the heart rate variability will be better too, but it's not something that I can recall that we have talked about. Yeah.
Right. And does the Garmin watch, does it break down the stages of sleep in terms of stage one, stage two?
Yeah, it does, but it's not as good as the Aura Ring. So for
Okay.
sleep phases, if you're really into the sleep phases, then usually Aura Ring is better. And for activity and heart rate variability, I would say that Garmin is better.
Okay.
So
Awesome.
I use both here. So it's also
So you
nice to have a second opinion so that you have uh, two devices, to have a second opinion. I also use the Whoop band a lot. So yeah.
okay. Is there a lot of overlap between the data that they give you?
Yeah, usually, and it's usually the Oura Ring will give me like 7 points less on the heart rate variability, but it will kind of follow in the same, how to say, the curves will be similar. So they probably just count, and calculate it just a little bit different. But the most important is, how your curve goes, and to identify what stresses you and what de-stresses you. So
Right.
um, yeah.
And in the book, what are some other areas that you cover in terms of ways to improve heart rate variability and areas that impact heart rate variability?
Yeah, so I start with sleep because that's the most important one, to have the sleep consistency, to calm down before bed, and then not with alcohol, not eating late meals, making sure that you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, which is what most people need. If you have a very good sleep consistency, that you go to bed kind of almost on the exact same time, then maybe you can be down to 6.5 hours. But it will be quite dangerous if you sleep. For example, Matthew Walker, who wrote the excellent book Why We Sleep, he say that if you sleep less than 6 hours, you have double the cancer risk than if you sleep more than 7 hours. So where as a doctor for many years, working night shifts with maybe 30 patients during a night, it's horrible work. You feel really terrible. Then, of course, I knew it was uncomfortable, but that it was carcinogenic and dangerous for heart disease and all of this. It was not common knowledge anyway.
Right. And in terms of the emergency medicine system in Norway, so in the US we have level one trauma centers, for the really serious traumas, and level two, level three. How is it stratified like that in Norway?
Yeah, so this would probably, where I work, would probably level 2. So if it's really serious, I pass them on into
Gotcha.
the probably level 3 that you would have, yeah.
But you still see things like heart attack, strokes.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. And and
Gotcha.
and I work in a district, so I may even be on an island where there would be like 4 hours to the nearest hospital.
Oh wow.
And there may be poor weather, so the helicopter can't come. So a lot of the time, I have to start the job that usually if I'm here, I just put them into the ambulance and just the 5 minutes and they're gone. So,
Right.
but other times I'm stuck with them, you know.
Yeah. And so you have enough supplies and the proper supplies to start an IV or to intubate if you need to.
Yeah, and you have the paramedics around also that are very, very good at these things also.
Yeah. And do you notice when you're working a night shift, because you still do night shift, correct?
Yeah, I'll do a night shift tonight, evening shift, and then night shift. So absolutely. But one surprising thing was that when I work in the ER, then I'm very calm. So where I used to think that, okay, I can't work so much at the ER, it's stressful. And then when I get to wash, I see that no, that's not true.
Right.
That's the most calming thing I can do, or one
Yeah.
of the most calming things I can do. But I know when I get here, that this will be a calm afternoon, no matter how many patients come,
Right.
or what's the
Because
trouble.
you
Of
love
course,
doing it.
if yeah. So of course, if it's a really critical situation, of course your heart rate goes up and it's stressful. But normally, within normal range, it's relaxing for me to work.
Yeah, that's a great point. So stress is relative. So you could have another doctor in your hospital or medical center, and their heart rate variability may go way down when they're working a
Mm.
shift, but yours is actually pretty good. And,
Yeah,
that's saying a lot because stress is relative. What stresses you out may not stress me out and vice versa.
yeah.
So, in terms of eating, in terms of, higher carb meals, if insulin spikes, what effect, if any, does that have on heart rate variability?
So that would give me stress. So at some times, in the beginning, when I was experimenting and everything was a surprise, then I remember that at one time, instead of the usual salad for lunch, there was a colleague that had a birthday, or maybe it was quitting their jobs or whatever, but they had a huge cake. And instead of the salad, I thought, okay, I could rather save some money and take two huge slices of cake, and my stress level just went through the roof.
Yeah,
And that was a real shock to me because I had never even contemplated that food would stress
right,
and become visible in the heart rate. And I remember sending messages, texting my nutritionist friends, and they had no clue. They had never heard of it, or didn't even, but they was sort of interested either. So I
right.
continued to to to
To
explore it.
investigate.
But yeah, so the heart rate will respond to the food that is not good for you. If the food creates inflammation in your stomach, your heart rate will go up
Right,
because of the inflammation. So you will be able to detect what levels of food is okay. And you will also see that when you're fasting or have a restricted feeding window, you will see the effect on your monitor, which you would not see it on the Aura ring because then you just get the results from the night. But this you would see on the Garmin watch that okay, if you don't eat until noon, then you're in the parasympathetic mode until noon, and that's
mhm.
kind of motivating that when you feel a bit hungry, at least you know that okay, but it's good for my fasting and my autophagy and so on.
If someone doesn't have enough metabolic flexibility to do the time restricted eating in terms of, their insulin and blood sugar drop really too low, what effect does that have in terms of,
I don't think it would do that because at least when I use the CGM, the continuous glucose monitor, then
Mhm.
if I'm not eating, my blood sugar is flat. It's really flat. So where I used to think that I had a low blood sugar, and when I then have the blood sugar monitor, I see that was not the problem. It was not the blood sugar. So even if you're hungry and before you start eating, the blood sugar is perfectly balanced. So,
Gotcha.
but of course, once you start eating, and if you eat a lot of carbs, it's just a roller coaster. If you eat a pizza, I'm really shocked because with the continuous glucose monitor, you see that after eating a pizza, it just goes as a roller coaster, maybe 6, 7, 8 hours, way into the night, and also creates a lot of stress at the same time.
Right. Sure. Yeah, that's a great point. So you talk about how wearables are particularly important for women. Can you tell us why? I know you mentioned the week before their menstrual cycle.
Yeah, that would be because the stress and high cortisol will affect the pituitary gland and the hypothalamus and or particularly the hypothalamus and affect the secretion of the female sex hormones and will disturb everything on their way, you know, from the PMS symptoms to endometriosis to polycystic ovarian syndrome. It will affect your chances of getting pregnant, your fertility. It will, for a lot of women, if their heart rate variability is really low, it can increase the chances of getting spontaneous abortions or getting a tendency to have that multiple times. So it's really important for their stress levels because, and also if the stress is high, it will affect the mitochondria. No, it will affect the macrophages, and they have a central role in the female cycle and the ovaries and all of this. And if you are too stressed, your macrophages are not working properly, and that will also give you symptoms. So stress for women, and of course, we know that the stress-related symptoms and diseases is a lot more common in women than in men. So
Yeah.
for the ones following me on Instagram and the ones that I contact me because of what they are finding, which is maybe 10, 15 people every day.
Wow.
Clearly, it's mostly women, and the most important thing is that they're managing with this wearable to regulate their nervous system and get rid of these symptoms.
Wow. That's huge because otherwise, a lot of times I think people will assume the absence of symptoms means I'm not inflamed, but you can be inflamed and not have any symptoms yet, correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm probably an example myself because before I changed my lifestyle and did everything wrong, I'm sure I was in a state of inflammation. I can see the pictures of myself at the time. I'm just laughing, you know, when I see them. And I had no symptoms. And
Right.
that could be just as problematic because the inflammation is still there. It's still going on, like burning a small fire. You're just not noticing.
Right.
So not having symptoms is not necessarily a good thing because you may continue to do damage to your system without you knowing it. Of course, whether you can get poor arteries and poor circulation, poor functioning kidneys and liver and everything without knowing it,
Right.
without feeling it. And when you feel it, it has already gone a long way. You know, you can have severe diabetes not feeling anything because we don't have an alarm system for these things. If
Right.
it's something is hot or you cut yourself, you know, you feel it because that's our ancient system, but it has never been a problem that your blood sugar was too high or that your hypertension was too high, at least over time probably. So there's no warning signals for the diseases that we now have until it's critical.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I encourage people to do blood work at least twice a year, looking underneath the hood, so to speak, just because you feel good. I mean, yeah, you want to feel good, but you could still have underlying issues that you want to track and monitor.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and that's a good point because under the hood, because it's like if you do that, then you have to go to the doctor, and it's only kind of the mechanic who can check under the hood and understand what is going on there. But having the wearables is like, okay, you have the dashboard suddenly, and you're in control, and
right.
you can see that. Okay, if there's a warning sign, you can okay, let's slow down a little bit here and avoid damaging the engine here.
Right. Absolutely. So you talk about their top 8 strategies to add 24 extra years to our life. What are
Mhm.
those 8 strategies?
Yeah, that's more or less the pulse cure. But the results comes from an American study of 700,000 veterans from the U.S. military that they have followed for I think it was 15 or 16 years, and they could see that the ones who did these 8 different strategies right, they lived 24 years longer than the ones who did them wrong. If they started from they were 40 years old. And the really good thing is that if you started from when you were 60, it was, I think it was 16 or 18 years to gain from incorporating these lifestyle changes. And it was, to have good sleep, to have less stress, to have a way to manage your stress, to not drink much alcohol, to stay away from smoking, to have good relationships, um, to be physically active, and what more? It was to stay away from opioids, um, And then it was probably a good diet, I think. Yeah, if I didn't mention that, sometimes I mix up what I've said, but good diet also, nutrition is also important. So if you do good enough on all of these different strategies, then it's also my clinical experience that then your chances of getting to 90 years old and still have a functioning mind and body is quite good. But if you do
Yeah,
all of these things wrong, you have poor relationships, you have too much stress, you're drinking alcohol, you're smoking, you're using opioids, and you're eating poor, and you're not have a good fitness level, then you would be lucky to get over 70 years old and still be functioning. Yeah.
right. Absolutely. What are two things you know today you wish you would have known, say, 10 to 12 years ago?
Oh, I don't know. I think it's been an interesting journey to find out, but it would probably have been wise to know earlier than that how terrible alcohol is for your stress levels and how important sleep is. So I think if I earlier, because I used to drink 2 glasses of wine or so every day. That was the advice. That was doctor's orders, some years
Mhm.
ago. So I thought it was a good habit. But of course, when you get the wearables, you see that it's a terrible habit. And that I would have liked to known earlier than that. I understood it 10 years ago, but even before that, it would be nice. And also the importance of sleep to make sure that I was sleeping better. Yeah.
Absolutely. Any other books you have in the works?
Yes, I actually just before this conversation, I sent away the last script for my next book. That is called The Rest Cure in Norwegian so far. We will see if it gets translated. So it's about finding rest, to be good at resting, because we're not necessarily overstressed, but we are under recovered. That's the biggest
Right.
problem. So we're supposed to stress. We're supposed to push ourselves. We're supposed to go at 110 miles an hour, where we can, when we should. But we're supposed to stop totally, into the gas station and stop, and to rest. And that is what we're really poor at. So, and also because this is me, that when I thought I was relaxing, and of course, up until now, and probably still, we call the parasympathetic nervous system the fight, flight, and freeze system. So I would then naturally expect that when I was never fighting, flighting, or fleeing or freezing, I was never in that state. I would then be in the rest and digest state. But we see that we will be in this sympathetic system even in our daily activities, and particularly if you have a poor fitness level, and also if we eat the wrong things and undersleep and all of these things. So that is why it was a surprise to me that I was in the stress levels, you know. So I don't know
Yeah.
what I started talking about, but I ended up there anyway.
Yeah, no, no, those are great points. Well, we really appreciate your time and the work that you're doing. I look forward to reading your book. We'll put up the links and we'll send you the graphics on social media.
Yeah, great. Yeah, fantastic. And thank you so much for letting me talk about this subject, and hopefully being to some use for your listeners.
Very useful. Very useful. Thank you so much, Dr. Færø. Have a blessed day or evening there in Norway.
Thank you.